So Aronian Grischuk, people are saying, and rightly so, that Aronian is the big favorite to win this whole thing. He does have the highest rating as far as I know. He did have excellent results recently, and he's a very complete player. But Grischuk is no slouch either, and I think he's a bit underestimated by the... I don't know by whom. Maybe he's not, but I think on his day his peaks are very high and he can actually play with anybody if he's well prepared and won't get into crazy time trouble. And let's see if he does manage to pull that off against Aronian. Obviously Aronian is the favorite, but I think of all the favorites actually Grischuk is the toughest first round pairing you could imagine. So I'm very curious to see how this match is going to go, and I wouldn't be all that surprised if Grischuk managed to pull an upset victory. I mean, the Lakers are down 2-0 against the Mavericks, right? So stranger things have happened. And Aronian does go 1d4, which is not a surprise at all. The surprise is that Grischuk goes for the Grünfeld. I mean, he's capable of doing anything, but he hasn't really been playing the Grünfeld a whole lot recently. Playing more Slavs and semi-Slavs and Queen's Gambits, Nimzos, even the King's Union. But the Grünfeld, we haven't seen much from him. So obviously he did some homework for this match. But also the Grünfeld, as we've seen in the very first game, Topalov against Anand, it's a risky match opening. Because if you run into some preparation, there might be no way back. And you might just lose. While with the Queen's Gambit declined, you can always be slightly worse and then hope to make a draw. Yeah, the game is finished. It did end in a draw. Even though, let's give some spoilers, it did look like Aronian was winning in the ending, so this is another slight surprise. And Aronian, he's been playing all kinds of stuff against the Grünfeld, but he didn't really choose this line very often recently, 7 bishop c4, the line Topalov also used to beat Anand, and one of the big tests of the Grünfeld. So anybody who goes here will have looked at it, obviously, but I don't think it was the line Grischuk expected from Aronian primarily. Knight c6, bishop e3, castles, castles. This is kind of the starting position. Hang on, the Chessbase guy Pascal is talking to me on Skype. I'll just tell him the show is still in full swing, so I can't really send him the file yet. Done that. And Grischuk in this position, this intrigued me a little bit. He chose the move b6, which is the move Anand also played against Topalov when he did return to the Grünfeld in game, I don't know, game 10 or something of their match. But it's never been considered a main line, and it's kind of a let's get a game type of move. I mean, I might be wrong about this, and it's just the best move. But the main lines used to be this bishop g4, f3, knight a5, bishop d3 takes, bishop e6, d5 takes and takes here. Well, people are scared to go here with black because white does get very good play for the exchange. And after that the big rage has been knight to a5, bishop to d3, and now b6 with a point of queen to d2, e5. And here there have been a lot of games at the highest level. Amongst those also the first match game Topalov against Anand, which Topalov won, and Anand didn't return to it either. So maybe this line is dangerous for black. But especially nowadays with computers so powerful, I would guess that if somebody puts in the time to just check one of these lines deeply, that it should be possible to make a draw there. The problem is you are usually relying on your memory, just trying to make a draw, and if you forget something, you might just lose, like it happened to Anand. Which is why the Grünfeld is a tricky opening to play in matches. Queen c7, for completeness sake, is also another mainline, rook c1, rook to d8, with more complicated play. Anyway, Grischuk chose b6, And Aronian decided to just grab the pawn with d takes c5. Topalov played some move like queen to d2 and went for a slower build-up. But d takes c5 is also by no means a novelty. Yeah, I also agree. He must have prepared this, of course, and he must have taken a look. It's just slightly surprising because the Grunfeld is, in general, it's a very forcing opening, and you want to force your way home to I don't know, maybe a draw or some position that is clear already, and b6 gives white some options to play. So I sort of think it's an emergency fix. Don't worry about your English Hieronymus, it's fine. b6, d takes c5, queen to c7. The sequence might look a bit surprising because black just gave up a pawn, but in fact it's very typical Grunfeld pawn sacrifice, and white should not take on b6 here, which might look natural, because this structure with the pawn on b6 against the pawns on c3 and a2, unless there's something concrete, it's normally fine for black, because he does get play against these pawns. He does get squares on the queen side, knight a5, knight to c4, maybe bishop to e6, rook fc8. So in general, this has been common knowledge for a long time that in this structure black has nothing to fear. So white must try to use the pawn he temporarily gained in some other way. And he does with knight d4. All this has still been played, I'll tell you when we reach new grounds. Knight d4, knight e5, knight b5, queen b8. It's pretty much a forced sequence, it's still very much theory, bishop e2. And here there were some games, even in the 80s. I think there was a game Knack against Ribley. Was it Ribley? Maybe Jansa. Not Knack against Jansa. Where black played a6. But then after, I think in the game knight a3 was played. But to my mind knight d4 looks better. B takes c, knight b3. And it doesn't seem like black can equalize so easily. So maybe that was Aronian's idea. But Grischuk, I'm guessing this is still preparation, played a strong novelty with b takes c5. And this is based on some extremely concrete line. So I'm pretty sure actually he cooked this up at home. Which also proves Hieronymus' point that he actually is well prepared for this line. B takes c, f4, knight to g4. This is sort of the point. Exploiting the fact that the knight on b5 is also hanging should white decide to take here. And basically it leads to some crazy tactical sequence which must have been checked with computers beforehand. Bishop takes c5, a6. Again relying on the trick that bishop takes g4 can be met with queen takes b5, I'm guessing. Yeah, this should be alright for black. And knight d4, which also looks natural, doesn't work because of knight to e3. So after a6, white is forced to go for the slightly ugly looking knight a3. Queen to c7, attacking the bishop. And bishop d4. But now, again, black is forced to do something. White is forced, black is forced, up and down. Black should do something very concrete because he has a pawn down and his knight is hanging. So he does have the very strong move e5. F takes e, knight takes e5. Queen to c1, good move, defending the knight on a3 and more importantly taking control of this diagonal, preparing queen to e3 or to f4. But if I can pause my endless blabber for a minute here, if we look at this position, I would say from just looking at it that black should have sufficient compensation for the pawn. White is one pawn up, but these pawns are weak. His king is slightly weakened because the f pawn is missing. And black actually has very nice squares for his pieces. The knight on e5 is good, the bishop on g7 is doing alright. He can put this bishop on e6 for example, then follow up with rook fc8 or some move like that. And it doesn't really look to me like white should be better here, frankly. Oh, even bishop b7 comes into consideration to take the pawn on e4. But to my mind, bishop e6 is the most harmonious setup. And theoretically speaking, I think after this move, Grischuk would have won the opening battle. And it doesn't look like white can really hope for an edge here. At least that's my impression after giving it tons of thought over the last minutes. But Grischuk went bishop g4, which continues to force the issue, but I'm not a fan of this move at all. Because it allows white to get a risk-free ending after bishop takes, knight takes, and queen f4. Where the extra pawn might make itself felt. The weakness of the king doesn't play a role anymore. He can defend all his pawns. Of course, black should have good chances to draw this, but here it's really an uphill struggle to make a draw. While after bishop e6, I think would have been everybody's game, and I don't think black would have been worse. So I'm not a fan of this move, bishop g4. For time reasons, because I'm getting nervous signals from Chessbase, I should wrap up the show. I'll speed up a little here, and we come to this kind of position. And I went over these moves before, and it didn't really look like black could do much on the way. It's somewhere between a draw and a loss. It's one of these 75% chance positions, where black might still have drawing chances, but it's very unpleasant to play in practice, because white just threatens to slowly improve his position, and black has to find some ways to generate counterplay. He went a5, which in general is a good idea. He gets the pawn out of the range of the rook and tries to push it even further, also to annoy a knight which might come to b2. I was wondering if he could go something like rook e8, knight f2, f5 to get some counterplay, but even here, after say rook d4, black is not out of the woods yet. So whatever he does, he's facing an uphill struggle for a draw here, it looks to me. And Aronian is, of course, well, I don't need to mention, he's a fantastic player, but he's very, very strong in these technical positions as well, and very creative. c4, a4, here he played a very strong maneuver, king d4, bringing the king to c3, because this defense is past a more important pawn. Rook to b8, Grischuk is desperately trying to generate some counterplay, but I'm not sure his position gives him enough options. Rook d5, yeah, I think rook b1 would have been a better try, just to activate the rook and maybe toy with the idea of rook c1 check. So he went knight to f4, rook to d2, knight to e6 back. Now white manages to take control over the b line. B line? B file, right? Yeah, it's B file. Rook b2, rook d8, knight f2. Man, next time I do this show, I will ask Chessbase to get me 2 people on the job. It's very hard to do all this talking non-stop. Don't you guys have any questions, or at least complain that I'm talking way too quickly? Which I am. I'm just trying to cover all 4 games in like an hour was the supposed time. I'm not really managing, but maybe I should stick to the highlights next time. Anyway, this position, I'm very surprised that Aronian didn't win, because it looked like he was winning, and he did play very well. Here he managed to get his c-pawn going, and I had basically thought that this game is more or less over here. Like Grischuk did manage to pull a miracle comeback. c6, king e7, knight b4, all logical. King to b3, knight c5, king takes a3, so now he has 2 passed pawns. Knight takes e4, rook d4, knight d6. Yeah, I agree. I also thought he would just win this technically. I mean, I could see it's never easy to win these endings, but a guy of Aronian's class, maybe he's not immune to nerves either. Yeah, I agree. I should have stuck to 2 games or 2 highlights, but what can you do? I guess I do like the sound of my own voice. After all, I just like randomly talking. And yeah, I completely agree with people wondering how he could mess this up. It does look winning, but Grischuk is a very resilient defender, and sometimes it looks like he's beat already, his position is not great, he doesn't have time on the clock, but then he does come back. I think I remember Aronian said in an interview even that he knows that Grischuk in time trouble is not going to make mistakes anyway, but going to keep playing strongly. So I don't think he was lured into a false sense of security by this. I don't know. He's human after all. Rook c5, check, king a6, g5. To my simplistic minds it looks like white should still be winning here, a4. He's just gonna keep improving his position. At some point the c-pawn will be too much of a factor, or the a-pawn, which is also no fun for the d-knight to deal with. King to e5, rook d2. I'm not sure, rook d1 looks a bit more natural to me, just to keep more distance from potential knight forks on c4 or wherever. But he went rook d2, rook c4. King a5 back, which is a slight sign that something might have gone wrong. But frankly, since they finished this game while I was talking about the other games, I didn't really look all that much at it. So let's... Amig is asking about 46, knight to b4. Let's see. I think knight b4 was a good move actually. Not only does it cover the c6 pawn, but it also prepares rook to d7, intending to queen that pawn. Actually I passed this point, but after rook c1 check, knight c2 I think was a quicker win. Just intending to go rook to d7 and then queen this pawn at some point while not giving black any activity. So I think knight b4 was excellent, but knight c2 might have done the job more quickly. Thanks for the kind words. I'll try to get back on the job one day. But it's a grind, as we all know. So yeah, here rook d2. I think rook d1 was an easier win. Rook d2, rook c4, king a5 back. f5, rook c2, king d4. And here, at first I thought that a move like c7 just has to be winning. But maybe it is not that easy after all. Trying to figure out why it's not that easy. Probably takes here and king to c5. Planning to round up that pawn. And now the white king does look a bit vulnerable actually. Frankly, I have no idea where exactly he messed up. Rook c4, king a5, f5. Here one would need a bit more time than I have to analyze if this c7 move, for example, if this is still winning for white or not. It's close, but it's already not so easy to get the job done for white. So before he has some easier options. Knight to c2, rook to d1, all those things. While here, rook d2, king e5, knight d3, king f6. We already see that white's pieces are kind of going back and not really improving their situation. And miraculously, Grischuk did manage to save this one. Now he might already be active enough because white has trouble to defend all his pawns. King b6, knight c8, king b7, knight d6, king c7, knight e4. So we can see white hasn't really made a lot of progress over the last moves. Well, black has improved his pieces. No Pre is mentioning that Grischuk managed to draw a lost game against Nakamura in one of the last rounds in Vike. I think that was in Moscow, where Nakamura was like 2 pawns up in a completely winning queen's ending and then blundered something. In Vike he actually did lose to... actually did beat Grischuk in the very first round, which set him up for a great tournament and Nakamura and Grischuk for a terrible tournament. But I do think Grischuk has recovered from Vike by now. It's 3 months ago and he's been preparing. And this very, very lucky escape today will give him extra confidence to hang in the match. So we will see how this one develops. For me it's still the most exciting match, because I think both players are so strong. King b6, knight e6. Now the position looks drawn, because black will always have enough counterplay on the king side, even if white goes c7. Knight takes, king e5. White won't be in time to save all his queen, to save a queenside pawn, so this is probably an easy draw with the king too far away. Knight d3, h4, h3, king e7, knight c5 takes, king d8, and they agree to draw. Maybe Aronian thought this was still winning, but I really doubt it. It's actually a reasonably straightforward draw. After, let's say, king d5, you can go g4, king e5, take here, king to c7, king takes f5, king takes c6, king g5, king d6, and as usual in these endings with the h pawn, as long as the black king reaches f8, it's a draw, and here he's very comfortably in time. You guys are saying here he missed his chance. So maybe h3 was it? After h4 c7? Which position did I just have? I didn't look at knight d3. c7 here, knight takes, king takes. Completely winning for white, says Ripka. Wow. First time I'm seeing these, and I don't have an engine on, so I really don't have a clue. Is it like +10 winning, or just like +2 winning? Because +2 winning might be wrong. But actually looking at it, yeah, I don't see how black can manage to be in time here, because the white king is back very quickly. Yeah, here I don't see how he can manage to exchange all the pawns. I think Mr. Ripka might be right, but I really would need some more time to check all this stuff, which we don't have today. I think we can agree that Aronian missed a couple of wins along the way, but I'm really not in a position to find all of them. So probably h3 was maybe arguably the latest mistake, because then after king e7 he can't even go c7 anymore, because now black has king d7. And here you have c7 or knight c5 here win. One would need a more detailed analysis. Same about 66, king d6 like as mentioned. I'm sure he had many options, but I'm sorry guys, I'm too lazy and too bad at endings today to figure them all out. I think we can agree Aronian was winning and he did blow it, and he's not gonna be happy. And on that sad note, it's a happy note for Grischuk though, I'll end the broadcast today. Knight e5, 69. Okay, let's have a look at that one. Yeah, but all these things, no offense, but that's much easier to figure out if you have a computer running than if you're sitting there at the board and are pissed that the game is still not over. I mean, why knight e5 should win here is also not so clear to me. I'll agree though that white is still better, and he shouldn't have gone for knight c5, because then it's just a clear draw, so knight e5 might have been a good try. But I'm not so convinced it's winning anymore, frankly. Anyway, thanks a lot for listening, everybody. Enjoy the matches. No real conclusions yet today after 4 draws, so it's anybody's game. I'm glad that we have high-class action today again. Serafine asks, who am I? I'm guessing he's asking me. Anyway, I'll say that. This was Jan Gustafsson covering for playchess.com, first game of the candidate matches. Thanks everybody for listening, and see you around. Bye bye.